Great. Well, hello and welcome to the first session of our training series, Managing Technology Change Projects for Business People. This first session tackles how to get a project started, how to get it agreed, funded, and planned before most people think the project has really gotten underway. We begin that with the business case and how to get people aligned and on board with your vision for the project. My name is Alan Reed, and I'm a director of Get Savvy. We provide online self-paced project management training, as well as advice for ordinary business people faced with a technology project. I'm really delighted to welcome with me today someone who has an immense experience in delivering the people side of projects, which of course is where all of the problems are. That's Matt Dunphy from Wharton Business Consulting. Matt, do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Matt Dunphy. I'm a manager at Wharton Business Consulting. I'm delighted to be a guest trainer today. I have long-term collaboration with Alan, and also I do have a lot of experience in the day-to-day of delivering programs, projects, and change. So, yeah, happy to get going.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Okay, let's get cracking. So first of all, before we get fully started, let me just say that the everything we are doing today is being recorded and will be made available to you after the webinar. We'll also be providing the content to you, so please don't spend all of your time scribbling mad notes. Please let it wash over you. Also, we've got the Q&A box. We want to have people asking questions about your own project and what you're concerned about, and any advice from Matt or myself. So please drop questions into the Q&A box in Zoom, and we have a Q&A session that we're going to be responding to towards the end of the webinar. Anything we can't tackle, we'll tackle by email afterwards. And then also to make the point that the content for the free training series is taken from Get Savvy's online self-paced training course, which is called Managing Technology Change Projects. So that course covers every phase of a technology project in your own business and tells you what you really need to know and what you must get right at every stage. The most common kind of feedback we get is, "I really wish I'd done this before my last big project." So that course is part of our mission to eliminate bad projects in the non-profit sector. So the chargeable course is really cheap. It's £300, but actually delegates on this training series will get a 50% discount for it. So we'll send you that afterwards. So if you are involved in a technology project in any way, do yourself a favor and get yourself a little bit of support. Finally, there are some detailed slides in here from the course that we won't have time to go through, but we wanted to include them so that we're there with you. Basically, we'll send them to you, and you don't need to then again worry about scribbling them all down. Okay, so moving forward from there, just a word about Get Savvy. We do provide consulting services and the training course. We'll send this after to you, but we can advise on your own projects or actually invite you to our training platform. We're 100% independent of any technology or provider, which is part of our DNA essentially. And then we'll send this again, but essentially we can either assist at the beginning of a project to help structure it, or what we do an awful lot of the time is provide advice throughout the project as people require it. Okay, so let's get you into character as a project manager on your own project. So imagine for a second that your CEO has pointed at you and said, "This situation with the membership system or with the website or whatever it is just terrible. Go and sort it out." And you're in this terrible and scary position of doing that. So what's required from you in that position? Because most of the people on this webinar are not full-time project managers. You're not full-time technologists, if that's a word. So you're a business person having to solve a problem that has a strong technology and project element to it. So first of all, what's required from you? All projects are different, yet most have very common stages, most common things that you can learn, and then they'll benefit you in all of the different projects that you have to tackle. So you'll need to be someone who learns the skills of planning and organizing and monitoring the project that you're pushing through. You need to understand how to get a team together, because one of the main skills is not to do it by yourself and not to think that you're the Lone Ranger, but to be able to share the problem with people and get tasks assigned and have people work with you. Then, of course, being able to report regularly and tell people what's going on the project, where you need help, what the issues are, share the problems to get them resolved. And then, of course, applying a combination of your business skills, common sense, and problem solving, along with techniques that you learn, are essentially what you need to do to be a successful project manager. Most of the people who are training with us or taking the course are essentially people who've never done this before. So what we really cover is the main things that you must learn, and what you must do and what you must avoid at every stage. So we're going to start with that, with the business case, and how you start planning and preparing your organization for a project. So what we'll be talking about today are the first two parts of the journey. So the business case is really sometimes called the conceptualization or the vision stage. It's essentially agreeing what we need to do, what are the options for solving a problem that we've got, and how to get people agreed on the right option and the way forward. And then, presuming that is agreed, that somebody says, yes, here is a load of money, go and sort out this problem, but don't forget you promised a load of benefits on the way. Presuming you do get a tick in that box, then you have to start preparing your organization for the project. And that comes a long time before you get your supplier on board. Quite a lot of what we talk about is, don't expect the supplier to do everything for you, and don't expect the supplier to brace your organization for the change. That's really on the organization itself. So how do we go about that? So the first thing we always recommend is writing a decision support paper for your project. Now, it's often called a business case. It can be called a project justification, and of course you scale it to the size of your project. So it doesn't have to be this enormous thing, but it has to provide information that sets you out on the right path. You need to know where you're going before you set off, or else there's not going to be a good outcome. So how do we go about doing that? So what we first of all suggest is that you have to consider these options and these elements first. So one of the first things that people often forget to consider when they're doing a business case is asking the question and showing that you've asked the question: is the project worth doing? Is this the best use of our scarce money and our resources in order to tackle this problem, or are there other ways of doing it? We want to talk a little bit about why it really matters to do this part of the project properly, and then let's get on to some specific advice and guidance on writing your business case. So the first thing is tackling the question of whether the project is worth doing, whether this is actually the best use of your money. And that's where the business case really becomes vital. It becomes something that you use as your vital tool for getting what you want out of the next stage, which is, of course, for your organization to agree with you and fund your project. So as part of that, asking the questions about whether the project is the right thing to do is something you must show that you've done. So you have to show that you've considered this area, and make the case for people that this is the best use of the money and resource that your organization has available. So the way that we suggest tackling that question is, first of all, is to tackle it from the direction of what the organizational benefits for the project will be. So it's no good simply saying, oh, our CRM system is out of date, or our website looks really old and clunky. That's really not going to persuade people to spend the kind of money that you're looking for. So what we suggest starting with is always, what is this organization trying to achieve? What are our goals? What are our ambitions? And how is this project going to support those goals and ambitions? And then once you've made that point, you really then have to answer the question of, okay, well, if it is going to support our goals and ambitions, what's required by this project, by executing this project, to achieve the benefits that we're promising, the support for our goals and ambitions on this project? What does it need in terms of time, money, resource, the degree of change that people will have to go through? You have to be clear about those things to enable people to make a decision. And then finally, you have to be able to demonstrate that the cost of doing this thing, all of the money, all of the time, all of the disruption, is actually worth the benefits that you are promising for it. If you can answer that central point about the benefits outweighing the costs, then you're well on your way to having people on board with you to fund your project and give you the support that you need. So there's a whole element around return on investment that we cover in the course, and we go to into some real detail. But we make a couple of really key points in here. First of all, the point of it is that your benefits from the project, what you're promising, has to outweigh the costs of the project. The second thing that we talk about at some length is that your benefits don't have to be monetary. They don't have to be numerical. There's a lot of benefits like improved customer service, improving your staff members' access to data and their ability to do their jobs well, that are non-monetary, that are non-numerical, but that you can declare and that you can be clear about, and that can outweigh therefore the costs of the project. There's soft benefits and hard benefits that all add up to your return on investment. So in other words, what you're promising with a business case is, if you give me this money, then I will achieve these things for you. And that promise has to be then clear and then has to be delivered as part of the actual project. So why the business case really matters. Essentially, I'm going to skip this one because we're going to send you the content afterwards. We're going to provide this to you. But the key of it, the core point I would like to make is that the business case isn't some kind of waiting room before you start your project. It isn't some kind of appetizer before you can get onto the main course. The business case is the project. It is you starting the project and starting the thought process that's going to underpin the project. So there's a whole series of elements in here that will actually determine the success or failure of your project. So actually getting it right as part of the business case is your foundation. So what we then talk about to a very large extent is what questions your business case needs to answer. So if you're going to provide people with the information they need to make a decision, then it's vital that you are clear about the things that people might pop up and ask you right away when you send them the business case. So you have to be clear about the problems that you're trying to solve. So for instance, our members can't find anything on our website and are getting miffed, or our staff can't manage the member relationship very well because they can't see the totality of the data, or our supporters can't see the value of the relationship with us because we can't prove it to them. Or define the problems and then how those problems can be achieved, and how those problems can be monetized and measured over the lifetime of the project. A key thing that, of course, is often forgotten is that point 4, where people presume that the project resources all lie with the supplier, when in reality your own organizational resources are going to be a big part of the project. And if you don't factor that in, then of course your project will struggle. So part of what the business case has to cover is showing that these things have been considered. So showing what the how of the project would look like. If you do give me this money, this is what the next 3 years for us will look like. The next year is going to be really busy, and then we'll deliver benefits in the years after that. So those kind of things have to be explained in very clear terms as part of the business case. So too many projects really fail to deliver on the promises in the business case, and it's usually because they lack alignment. They lack that kind of platform at the beginning and buy-in from people when the business case element is presented. So What we find is equally important on a business case is, yes, there's the technical information in the document, but we find it is every bit as important to make sure that everyone that you need to be involved and consulted has a part in creating the business case and agrees with it before you ask for the funding. So, Matt, do you mind if I just bring you in here and just ask you, in your experience, what's the best way of getting people to support your business case?
Yeah, so I think the process on screen is really helpful. As Alan says, you want to actually make this a people engagement exercise. So when you have a draft business case, it's really important to set up some meetings with stakeholders in order to share that draft and get their input and their feedback. Now, what this crucially does align you to do is refine the business case before it moves forward towards approval. It's really important to gather people's thoughts and their perspectives in the business case as a living document before you actually sit down and get it approved. All stakeholders are important. Some are more important than others. You do want to be engaging via your project sponsor with whomever they think is crucial to have input. Usually that might be a chief finance officer or a finance director, people like that who will have a real stake on improving the business case when you get there. And I think the last thing to say is I always say if it's not an agreement exercise, if people don't 100% agree with everything in the business case, it is crucial that they are aligned. And that's your objective. If I can get everyone aligned behind an option, then I have a very strong chance of getting my business case approved.
Fantastic. That human side is so often forgotten. Then a common question we often get is who's responsible for creating the business case? Classically, it's the project sponsor. So this is typically someone in the senior leadership team who has recognized that something is wrong, that something is improving within the business, and then starts putting forward the justification for doing it. But what often happens, of course, is the person in your position on this webinar is asked to substantiate that, is asked to go off and do the research and do most of the work because they're getting the big bucks and making you do most of the work. So it's vital that you understand all of the steps involved in the business case. Part of the of creating a good business case is research and substantiating the information within the document. We provide a lot of hints and information on where you can provide your research on what the costs of this project could be, what the resourcing could be, what the implications, what you must learn from others. So we provide that within the course itself. We'll provide this to you after the webinar, but I'm going to skip it in the interests of time today. But there's a lot of advice on how you can substantiate and provide evidence for your business case so that you don't end up embarrassed by misunderstandings later. Okay, and then just in terms of writing your business case, Matt, I'm going to ask you to comment if you don't mind. But there are classically you can Google this and download a kind of contents page for a business case off the internet anytime. But what really matters is getting the message across, is making that persuasive case within a document, however brief it is. So Matt, could I just ask you to comment on what you find to be really important when you're putting these kind of sections together?
Yes, and again, I would say if you look at the process or the components on screen, even if you've seen a business case before, it's slightly different for technology projects. I think these are right. And I think the key point I would share is it's you're telling a fact-based, evidence-based story here. So you need an executive summary where you're going to describe your objectives and the vision for the project. Scope is important because you need to say, we will do this, we won't do this during the project. Assumptions I find key because you're saying, our plan at the moment is based on these things. We have a 12-month timeline because we need to be ready for conference next year. Again, you're telling that story. Options, be bold, get everyone aligned behind a strong option and a recommendation. That's your job with the project sponsor. And perhaps put a riskier one in there, a higher investment option that at least could be debated, even if it's not chosen. Risks and mitigations, you always want to cover the landscape and say, this may happen and this is how we're going to manage it very positively. And usually the question a lot of, learned people ask in the room is who needs to be involved in this, at what level, for how long. So you want to identify your stakeholders and also actually calculate, even if it's an estimate, the amount of time you think you need from key people.
That's
And
really good advice. So I beg your pardon, Matt. Sorry, you were going to say something
I was
else.
going to say, I think I'm going to go on in a moment just to talk a little bit about almost the nature of the business case as a document. But yeah, that's what I think is important at this point.
And that's great. And I would link that to what you were saying earlier, which is that as you are creating these sections, don't do it in a vacuum. So don't create some beautiful artifact and then email it to people and say, oh, can you approve my outrageous spending request? Going back to what you were saying earlier, is as you're developing these sections, as you're developing your evidence for the business case, it's then to take it around your colleagues and say, have what do you think of this? Have I forgotten anything? Does this represent, your view? And then at least you're flushing out objections early. You're having people comment on, well, that doesn't really work for my area, or can you add that in, or I don't quite agree with that point, or yes, you're so right. Can you make that stronger? Um, you're going to then get that buy-in. You're then going to get a better document, a better case, and you'll have people on board with you all of the way through. So great, thank you, Matt. That really makes perfect sense. So just carrying on, then I'm just going to ask you to comment a little bit further as we carry on through that whole kind of getting the thing written and getting it approved. That second bit is just as important as the first bit, if you like. Could I ask you to just comment further on actually getting the process done?
Yes, and again, I'll probably lean into my role here as, the person thinking about the people and the human side of this. If I continue that analogy of you're telling a story, a shared story with your stakeholders here, you do want it to be clear and concise. No one wants to open up one of these and find War and Peace, as it says on screen there. It needs to be just the right amount of detail for the audience. Now, if I say telling a story, I really mean you are sharing the vision for the future. You are literally doing that. And secondarily, you're also talking about the benefit and value that people will experience in the future. Both of those points are really crucial. And there's just to go on then to give a little bit of advice about, getting the level of detail right. Think about two things. Think about the scale of the project or the solution that you're looking to have in future, and you will say, if it's a relatively small system we want, if we've got an 80-page business case, we've done something wrong. And again, think about your audience and the level of detail they need. Usually what people need at a senior level is an executive summary or a key, 6-page summary of what you're asking for. And you can put all of that beautiful detail for the people who need detail beneath.
Absolutely. That all makes perfect sense. Thank you so much for that. Okay, and then carrying on from there, so of course we're then at the position of, oh great, we've got our business case approved, but then of course it doesn't mean that the business case is a dead document. This is something that gets forgotten all of the time. As part of getting the business case approved, you've made all of these outrageous promises. You've said that our staff time is going to be much more effective, working processes will be more streamlined, our members will be delighted, our supporters will be more engaged. Whatever it is that you've said, you're going to have to live up to that as part of the project. So actually the business case becomes part of your definition of what you're going to achieve with the project, and you have to keep checking back with that. So essentially, you have to remember to focus your project on what you've said and what you're going to deliver, or else somebody later will say your project has failed. You've had an unsuccessful project because you didn't live up to the things that you said you were going to deliver. Okay, so the summary of all of that it essentially is that um, we uh, we really need to focus on the people side, as Matt has been really clear about. That yes, you need the research and the information and a clear argument within the paper. But if you don't have the buy-in and you don't socialize it before and go around making sure everyone is on board, almost so that you're going as a lobby to the fund holders, you're saying the whole management team is behind this. This is what we need. Then you're going to struggle. Focus on your benefits and ROI, and making sure that the it pays for itself. I would do it with my money because I'm going to get more out of it than I'm putting in. And if you're not making that clear, then really you can't blame anyone for not approving it. And then be realistic. You are going to have to live up to these promises that you make. So if it's only going to deliver the first part of the benefits, be clear about that so that you've got credibility to get more money to deliver the second set later. Okay, so great. Let's move on from there. And then the next element of this session is really, okay, so now you're in this completely terrifying position that you spent the last whatever period of time begging for this resource or making the case that we must do this. And I'm going to deliver all of these benefits. And then somebody says, all right, well, just to shut you up, here is the money, here is the approval. Make sure you deliver on the benefits that you promised, because we'll catch you out if you don't. Now you're into starting to prepare your organization for the project and the change. So let's talk about how you go about doing that, because there's very often a lot of anxiety at this point. Well, what if I'm going to start asking people for their time? I'm going to start booking people into meetings and kind of telling them what to do and asking them, to do A, B, and C, and they're going to ignore me. They're going to disrespect me and not turn up, and I won't get clarity. And my management team will run off. They've given me this problem, but they're going to run off before they help me. So how do we go about making sure that doesn't happen? So first of all, you're not the Lone Ranger. You're not the first person to ever done this. There are tried and tested techniques and tools that will make this work for you. A lot of it, by the way, is about your project documents. And how you outline things and how you make it clear what people need to do and how you track things. Your documents are your friends. They're not must-do things afterwards. And by the way, for delegates on this webinar, we're sending out some very nice free templates afterwards to help you start structuring your business case and planning your project. The course itself has over 30 odd templates that really help you get going. So let's look at how you start planning your project, look at the project governance and nurturing your teams and your project documents. So carrying on from there. So let's help. How do you make your project succeed? These two words up there are the vital things. Again, people often find that they think, oh, if I get my supplier, they're going to do all of these things for me, and that's the opening chapter of a lot of disaster stories on projects that we get asked in to advise in or come in and salvage. So don't put yourself in that position in the first place. What you're essentially doing is making sure that your planning is going to set up a framework where your supplier can fit into that framework, not that you're going to be dragged by the nose by your supplier. So your planning and preparation will make sure that you achieve these benefits out of your project, that people are agreed and aligned and expected to work towards the project, and everyone knows what they're doing. So that you're supported and you can share problems and work through them. So it's all about putting that time in to make sure you're in the right frame and your organization is prepared. So how to start planning. We find this to be just vital. Matt, I'm going to ask you to comment here again, if you don't mind, and about setting the roadmap of expectations or reality for the organization. If you could just comment on that, please.
Yes, absolutely. If you bring the elements in, what I'd say here is, as Alan's indicated, your project plan, for me, it's a living document, it's a collaboration tool, and it is a roadmap. It visualizes the journey you're going to take on your project. And then on the right-hand side there, if we say, it's a bit like Rudyard Kipling's, five W's, what, when, how, and who. If we've covered the why of our project and the business case, you're looking at what work needs to be done, when it needs to be done by, key milestones, destination points along the way, how the work will be done, the approach we're going to take, probably eventually with our technology partner, and then also then who is going to be doing the work crucially, and what level of effort is required.
Exactly. And getting ahead of all of those things and getting your organization on board with those things are really what starts to matter at this phase, because you need these things in order to start looking for your technology supplier. You need these things in order to get requirements gathered. We tackle this in later sessions. and to have people collaborate and make sure everyone's aligned and agreed, so that you're not in a position of saying, here's what we want to do, and then somebody says, I don't agree with that. That's not what I'm, or here's where we need your team to contribute. Oh, well, we're not available for the next 6 months. All of those things at the client side are the most common causes of projects struggling. Let's talk a little bit about project governance. I'm just going to talk about this really fast because essentially we cover this really well in the course, and there's a lot of content, and we'll send you this content anyway. But the whole point of the project governance structure is recognizing that this is going to be a big organizational change in most cases. Even a new website, which you might think, oh, it doesn't involve my colleagues very much, actually is going to involve a lot of decision making around the organization, and a lot of processes start on the website and then flow into the back office. So really, if you haven't got this structure of people being involved and making decisions and approving decisions and being aware of what's going on, then the project trips over itself really well, really fast. So the thing to do is to set up a structure where you've got the operational teams at the bottom who are doing things, and they're kind of pushing the colleagues to get staff work done on the ground. Then the project manager is coordinating all of that. With the project sponsor as the board level or the senior management person who's ultimately responsible for making the goals of the project, make sure they are delivered. Now, one of the key things we talk about on the course is that the role of the project sponsor and the project and the management team in the project is to say, how can we help? It's not to get you in as a project manager every 3 months and shout at you. It's to say, how can we help? And your role as a project manager or person who's coordinating the project on the ground is to make it clear to the management team, here's where I need your help. Here's where I'm nobody's boss. I can't go around telling people what to do. You need to lend me your authority. And when I don't get it, I don't get the support I need, you then need to reinforce that in the most, friendly, convivial way until there's a real problem. So there's a lot of advice and guidance about how to get the best out of this kind of structure that is important. So we'll send this to you. So then in terms of who should be on your project team, it's really important to recognize that there's different elements of it. So there's the authority element, which comes from the project sponsor and the wider management team. But then there's the expertise element as well, which is recognizing that you have different subject area experts around the organization who are really knowledgeable at events or about education or about CPD or about fundraising, whatever it is. And they need to be represented on the project as well as the kind of coordination and drive that comes from the project manager themselves. So those business area leads, there's a human side, which I find Matt is always fantastic at, of getting people to feel consulted and involved, and therefore they'll give their time to the project. But there's also, their knowledge of saying, yes, this will do what I need for my business area, and I can therefore sign it off at the appropriate time. So when we get to aligning with your teams, there are some real details that we cover. We can only talk about it really briefly here, but it's about what you would need if somebody were giving you a ton of work to do and wanting you to support them in a campaign or a goal. So it's essentially about making sure that your teams understand what their role is, understand where it'll impact their day-to-day jobs, what's expected for them to be delivered. And that's not just a one-off thing at the beginning. It's something that carries on throughout, is repeated every day and every week of the project, and making sure that there's that clarity. Leadership we find to be important. It's not about being bossy or authoritarian or some kind of alpha personality or any of those horrible things. It's really about taking accountability for the project, supporting people, owning a problem, and working collaboratively to share solutions to that project, and being positive and rewarding people, giving credit where it's due. Those are the kind of things that we find make a project go well and have people support you all of the way through. So I mentioned before that project documents are your friends. This is something that often gets misunderstood. Project documents are not your kind of homework that you do after the project or that you have to feed in order to show you're doing the good job afterwards. Actually, project documents are the things that allow you to make sure you're not forgetting stuff. They're your safety net. They'll think, oh, I was supposed to remind this person of that, or that's coming up. I need to think ahead and make sure that goes well. So these are your main assets for making sure that you don't fall flat on your face and you look great as part of your project. So we give away these templates and we have a lot of guidance on how to manage them. We don't have time to go through it in any great detail today, but just as a quick kind of fly through, let's just we'll just mention these documents on here. So your project initiation document is where you're making sure that the project's properly defined, the goals, and the roles and responsibilities and the governance structure. Your plan, Matt has been talking about, but making sure that your milestones are there, that everything that needs to be done is laid out and doesn't get forgotten with a time frame and who's going to do it. The RAID log is something that's vital for a project. Risk actions, issues, and decisions. It's where you're tracking everything that's going on. And so that when you say, all right, we'll add this to the project in month 3, and then someone comes along later in month 9 and says, why is the project late? You can go back and say, it's because you signed up on this thing in month 3. And you agreed that the project would be late at that time because of that. So this, again, your vital tool for making sure that you look good. There's some classic reporting templates that we provide that essentially make sure that everyone can see you're doing a good job and can see where they fit into helping you on the project. Budget tracking is of course vital. There's supplier costs, there's costs from your existing supplier for the data migration or whatever it might be. So all of that needs tracking, and it can be one of your first signs that something is going wrong on the project when budgets are going the way that they're not supposed to go. And then there's the whole things of showing that how you can keep people on track and how you can manage people's time. Things like kickoff meeting agendas and other classic documents. So it's worth recognizing the importance of these things, spending time on it, allocating time for yourself, and doing them ahead of when you need to, because they really will save you when it comes to managing a project. So let me just zip through really fast. So the whole point of a PID is just to make sure everyone's agreed on what the project is going to do, and are signed up for it, and you can show people to it as part of the project. The whole part of the project plan is to make sure that you're always ahead of the project. You should always be 3 months ahead of your project, looking back to drag it behind you, not behind your project looking forwards. That's what the project plan is for. And then a common question that we often get is, why do I need to create my own project plan? Isn't the supplier going to give me a project plan? And the answer is yes, the supplier is going to provide you with a project plan, but that should fit into your project plan, and then they become combined. Because what the supplier won't do is manage your resources for testing, manage your resources for things like discovery and making sure that everyone understands what the project is going to achieve, and manage all of your resources for all of the activities that happen around the supplier. And you need to be the first person to notice when you've got a problem and when people aren't available, and you've got annual conference and you've got people on holiday. All of that will need to come from you, and then dovetail into the supplier's plan, and your plan will then instruct the supplier's plan. They'll move it around to accommodate the things that you have found. The RAID log is a very detailed document, but as I say, it's your vital tracker for what's going on the project, so that you can then make sure that you're not getting the blame for things that are going wrong. Okay, so we're going to send you this information after the webinar, just to make sure you have the information that you need. Okay, something that we find to be extremely important on planning a project and getting people initiated is something that's very often neglected, which is the kickoff meeting. That's your chance to launch the project internally long before your suppliers are on board, and get everybody in the right frame of mind, establish your role, establish how you are going to work and guide people and get people to do things. So Matt, do you mind if I just ask you to comment on what makes a good kickoff meeting and how that should be approached?
Yes, well, as you say, I view this as a milestone point. There's probably a deal of work done before on your business case and planning, and you might be introducing more people at this point. But this is a very positive, optimistic, forward-looking event, really. And as you see on screen, there's a couple of key things here. You want to gather people together in your fellowship and get them onto the same page about your project's vision, essentially. It is obviously an introductions meeting for certain people, and actually really giving the spotlight to your project sponsor, really, because again, they are a key leader in the project. Can't emphasize enough. This is like a building trust exercise, building credibility, and gaining buy-in for this huge endeavor that's ahead. And if you think, well, what do people need to step away from after this? They need to have a sense of their own commitment and their purpose, so they feel charged to help lead the project really through the months ahead.
Great. And exactly as you say, Matt, I find that if you the kickoff meeting should really be pretty stage managed. You have to have considered it in advance. There should be no surprises at a kickoff meeting. People should know what they're getting into. There should be enough information, as you say, that people know what's expected of them as well. So having a project kickoff meeting go positively and well, with people leaving with a sense of mission, is a really good foundation point for the rest of the project. And you can imagine what the opposite looks like as well. So let you do your best to make sure that that does not happen to you. Okay, so then we've talked about the attributes and how you put yourself in the position of being an effective project manager during it. And we emphasize, it's not to do with being some bossy alpha personality who goes around shouting at people. It's really about making sure that you've got the tools and you know what's expected a few pages ahead of the exercise book of everyone else, who's not actually leading the project. So your role really is to communicate with people what's expected of them, where the challenges are, where help is required, and that means it's a central part of the project. So we're not talking about sending out a kind of e-shot every 2 weeks with a project update. It's really communicating sometimes on an individual level, sometimes on a team level, sometimes obviously up to the management team, and making sure what people need to understand is clear to them. So we have a communications plan, template that essentially says, all right, this group needs to know about this stuff. This group needs to know about this stuff. This group needs to be updated every time this happens, and just making sure that is managed properly will prevent problems happening, and save you a ton of time. So then as well, we often find that if you're asking people to collaborate, then there's a whole set of techniques around doing that. So and being clear with people. We had on a previous webinar, one of our speakers running a project in a membership organization was saying quite often what she does is she just phones people up and said, is this going to be okay for you? Are you going to be able to do this? I know you've got this and that going on, and those kind of things really, that human level makes all the difference and can't be forgotten. It can't be something that you're doing from an ivory tower. So then let's have a little bit of fun with this. Let's talk about a scenario and a challenge that often happens on projects. And Matt, I'm going to ask you to comment on this as well. So
Hmm.
let's just say a staff member. So you've got the project's underway. You think you're motoring, and then a staff member from the finance team comes up to you and says, "Oh, look, I'm really sorry, but we've got an urgent audit to finish, and we're no longer going to be able to do the testing that we said we were going to be able to do, and we're going to be out of action for at least a month." Now, as far as you're concerned, as the project manager, well, you can't go live without this being tested, and the finance team are the people who can test it. Does that mean that your go live date has just gone out by a month? So what I'm going to ask people to do is just to give their view on what the question we're asking here. I'll just put this up on screen. The question I'm asking here is, what do you think you should not do? Here's a list of things that could be helpful, And then we're saying, pick the one out of here that is the bad thing to do that would actually get in the way of your project. So we're looking for the bad thing to do. So if you go through here and say, what do you think is an unhelpful thing to do? And I'll just give that a little bit more time to allow people to read the options. And then we'll see if we've got a bunch of bossy boots people on our webinar or more collaborative people. So I'll just give this another kind of 5 or 6 seconds. Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to share share the results of this. Okay, so what we said is what was the bad thing to do, and in the main, pretty much everyone has said that the bad thing to do is to demand that your finance director makes their staff member, just look, you've said you're going to do it, you just have to do it, get on with it. First of all, you're the project manager. You typically aren't anyone's boss, so that's probably not going to be the most fruitful conversation that you've ever had. And second of all, before you start having those kind of arguments, there are other things that you can explore first. So Matt, everyone's pretty much agreed with the right way forward. We're a bunch of nice people on this webinar. What are your thoughts when that kind of thing happens? And it does happen all the time. What kind of things do you find to be most effective?
Yes, well, I think we're a bunch of smart people on the training because, yeah, it's a long road running a technology project. And if you start to annoy people or are too dictatorial early, then, it's a long road for you. You're going to have challenges on an interpersonal level. I always say, there's a module in the Get Savvy course on change management. There's something deep in here about detecting a level of resistance to the project that might be going on. So you might need to do a little bit more stakeholder work with finance to buy them in a bit more. Now, if this is a practical issue, what I would say is always be flexible. A project manager's responsibility is to be an arch negotiator. So you can always make it work at a later date, move something forward, move this testing back, and it shows someone that you're willing to, appreciate what else they've got going on at work.
That's a really good point, because it is a long road, as you say, and it is about getting the best out of people at every stage. And if someone's not bought in, there are various kind of passive aggressive ways that they can be shown, and you have to kind of, in a way, take responsibility for that. Okay, these are one of the main beneficiaries of this project. Why aren't they bought in? So it might need another round, but of course. Always, ultimately, your main resource is going back to your project sponsor and going back to the management team to say, can we find a solution for this? Help me find a solution for this problem. Okay, let's do another one real quick. So here's a second scenario. Happens all the time. This isn't some abstract mythic thing. So somebody comes to you and says, we've done the discovery, the contracts have been written, budgets have been agreed with your supplier, and then one of your business areas comes up and says, oh, we've just realized we need this whole bunch of stuff, or at least one extra new thing that isn't included in the project. Can we add it to the project? It's really going to impact us if we don't have this thing. Sorry. So I'm just going to launch another quiz, and this is again the same thing. What's the unhelpful thing to do? You're looking for the negative thing. What would be a bad thing for you to do as part of that scenario where someone's come up and says, sorry, we forgot this thing. Can we please add it to the project? So if you can go through there indicating what you wouldn't do, and then we'll just talk about that really briefly. Okay, so I'm going to give it a couple more seconds, but I can already see that we're a group with a high degree of social skills, and I suspect we'd all get on if we went away for a camping weekend together. So good results here. Let me just share them. So essentially, pretty much everyone has agreed. Just telling the staff member, tough luck. you had your chance, Bunky, is not the most productive way of getting the best out of people. Partly because this could be something that is going to cause the project to fail if it's not in there. So Matt, could I just ask your comments as well? Again, this happens all the time. Now you've got this bad news surprise that the budget might not be the budget. What kind of things do you find to be effective here?
So I do think anyone who's going to join the training next week on requirements gathering and supplier selection, of course, you don't want to miss a feature. That's quite a large thing to miss. For whatever reason, this is a lesson learned here, right? And we do learn lessons in realistic technology projects. So what I would say, good advice here is to actually sit down and analyze what it is needed to deliver the feature. Given we're catching it at this point. As you see on screen now, talking to your sponsor and your senior management team, really about whether we can fit this into the project scope. And again, I go back to negotiation. Usually, there's probably a way, if it's of enough urgency and priority, to build it in, whether that means something else already in gets deprioritized, or you add to your project scope and you can manage that change in cost and time.
Great, great, really good, really good advice. Um, okay, so what I'll do from there is carry on, and then just to wrap up on the planning side, essentially it's about your preparation. Not expecting it just to happen, not drifting into the project and expecting the supplier is going to do everything. Your project documents are your vital tools. Even if you don't like documents in the main, and you're not the most organized person in the world, and you don't plan your week out and all of that stuff, your project documents will save you. So you've got to find a way of making yourself do those things. And then once you've found, that saved me from getting shouted at a few times, you'll actually make sure that you always keep them up to date. And then the communication side, it's all about getting people on board. It can't be one-way broadcast. It is asking people as well. As Matt says, we have a change management and getting the best out of people session as part of this training. And then so it's about making sure that you're listening to people as well as letting people know what's expected of them. Okay, so then this is the checklist for if you've finished the planning reasonably and you're ready to start engaging with the outside world and talking about requirements and supplier selection, is really making sure that everyone has signed off on the PID, that the project plan is approved and the roadmap, and everyone knows what they're getting into for some period of time, and your project team are clear, they're on board. They're booked out, their resourcing and so on is agreed, and they're signed up with your initial set of project documents. Okay, and your governance, so that your management team know where they fit in. The meetings are booked. They know when they sign off, what you have approval to do without them signing off. Matt's comments about the kickoff meeting, I think, are vital. That it's booked and that you are, or held, and that everyone is set off to have a great project, and that you have everyone with access to the documents and that they are in a good state. So Matt, if I could just invite you onto the Q&A questions, please.
Mhm.
So I've got a great question here, which is that many project managers assume that change is predictable and linear, and that detailed plans are the way to ensure success. And there's a kind of moving into a topic of agile versus waterfall, and so on. But this comment that things change on the ground, that fluid plans are more valuable. And how do you get people to respond well when you first of all said, oh, the project is going to look like this, and now new changes are coming through, it's going to take longer, or this is going to take so much more time? How do you manage that whilst keeping things positive and maintaining credibility?
Yeah, and I'll be brief for effect because I know there might be another question in there. I mean, you really rely on your capabilities as a project manager. I think whoever asked the question is right. Things change. And to address it briefly, sometimes an agile structure really helps with flexibility if something arises like a new feature. I don't think that waterfall can't take that. It's just slightly different approaches. But I would say think about it's always rescoping, replanning, rethinking, and that's why your plan is a living document. And if you lean on the buy-in and the collaboration, then if something happens, even if there's an error, or an oversight, you can respond. That's where
I
the
think
human power of this all comes in.
absolutely. And setting that expectation at the beginning. Look, this is our framework. This is what's going to happen roughly, but it is going to move. It is going to change. Then people can be realistic about it as we go. Then we've got one more question. I think we've got time for just in the last minute or so. I've got a question here, which is another really good one. What if the organization is full of busy people who don't see the value in reading or reviewing PIDs and project plans and RAID logs, etc., or even any kind of project plans or tasks that they're expected to do? Um, if you're the only person who cares about the project management documents, um, or maybe even cares about the project, you could say, if you're taking that more widely. How do you then respond to that? Matt, could I get your comments on that kind of fairly bleak situation?
So I suppose I'm going to frame this in the lens of comms and engagement and feedback, sometimes if you've got the detail, it's just finding a way to communicate that at a higher level to very, very busy people. Of course, there might be a deeper issue here, and it is really where, even if it's later and people are quite disengaged, seek to re-engage them, take their feedback, find out what's not working for them about their role in the project. And hopefully, use your sponsor and your senior management team, and that can repair things and get you back on track, get them working for you and in the direction of the project.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. So it does show that something's been missed, something to do with engagement and framing the project and having people understand that it's important for them and they will benefit from it. Their team will benefit from it. But it might also be that they've missed the fact that the senior management team have said this is vital for our organization and we expect you to support this project. And if you don't support this project, then we'll have a conversation with you about it because it is vital for the success of our organization. So something there has been missed. And it might be that you have to go back to the management team and say they're not feeling it. I can't boss them around. I'm not the boss. So this is where I said to you at the beginning, I'm going to need your authority for this project. Well, words are cheap. I've now got a problem. Can you please, help frame this with these stakeholders so that they then support the project? Quite a lot of your role as a project manager is making sure that the management team do fulfill their role of leadership and setting the tone and setting the priorities for the project. Great, thanks so much for that, Matt. Okay, just out of time, but essentially the next sessions in the training series. As Matt says, the next one is on 3 and 4, requirements gathering and moving through the supplier selection. We're then talking about the implementation phase where we get into 5 and 6 and how to bring people along with the project, change management and ensuring the benefits get delivered as part of 7, which is implementation. And then of course, UAT, testing, go live preparation and making sure that the project delivers what it's supposed to. So we're looking forward to seeing you on those future sessions. And then finally, just thank you so much for everyone for attending. We will provide the content to you, and we will provide the discount code to you, and we will provide some free templates to you, which are drawn from the course itself, which are of value in their own right. And then we'll also share with you some Dear Savvy articles. We have a community of people who write in to vent and say, oh, my manager is not doing this, or the project team are not doing that, or the supplier has done the other. And we write back with solutions to them, and we post them up as part of the Dear Savvy community. So we'll share that with you and invite you to join the community to vent on your own project problems or learn from other people's pain. That's always a fun thing to do. Finally, we look forward to seeing you on the next one, which is this time next week at 9:30 start, where we're talking about requirements gathering, which is the first time you're challenging your organization to spend time with you, and how to then start approaching your vendor selection to choose your ideal partner without a whole bunch of sales waffle and misunderstandings and shouting and disputes later. So great. Thank you so much for everybody. Matt, I want to thank you so much for your advice and guidance for joining us on the webinar today and taking part in the training.
Absolute pleasure.
Great. Okay, everybody, have a great day and look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.